Today we're going to talk about a very special man, Brother Lawrence, and how he teaches us to live in constant communion with God. One question we can ask ourselves is it possible to feel God's presence in all our day-to-day activities, or is it only reserved for special moments of prayer? Let's start by learning a little about Brother Lawrence's life. He was born in France in 1611 under the name of Nicholas Herman. He had a simple life, growing up in poverty, and even became a soldier when he was young in order to get food and support. After being wounded, he left the army and worked as a lackey, opening carriage doors and waiting on tables. But Nicholas had a very special conversion experience with Jesus at the age of 18, which changed him. Around the age of 40, he felt a deeper call to dedicate himself to God and became a lay brother, a kind of monk, in the order of the Discalced Carmelites. He joined the monastery in Paris and came to be called Lawrence of the Resurrection. It's interesting that he, a man who limped and walked barefoot, spent his last years repairing sandals so that others could walk more comfortably. This shows his humility and generosity. How did such a simple man become as famous and well-known as Brother Lawrence? What was so special about him? He discovered a simple way of praying from the heart, which he called practicing the presence of God. He learned to connect with God all the time, not just in church or in moments of personal prayer, but also while working in the kitchen, doing chores, or talking to people. Brother Lawrence lived in constant communion with God, and the people around him noticed his peace and joy. He attracted people from his community who sought his advice and prayers, and over time, people from all over France came to him for spiritual guidance. Brother Lawrence died in 1691. But his story didn't end there. A priest called Joseph de Beaufort collected Brother Lawrence's letters of spiritual direction and some conversations that people remembered having with him, and, in 1692, published a book called The Practice of the Presence of God. The book became very popular, and for 4 centuries millions of people have been drawn to his writings, which teach us how to live in communion with God. In the words of Joseph de Beaufort, all readers, whatever their occupation, will find profit in this book, for in it you will find a brother as busy as you are in outside activity, but a brother who, in the midst of all the demanding tasks, has learned to combine contemplation with activity. Over the last 40 years, our brother has hardly ever been away from the presence of God. Let's now learn a little about Brother Lawrence's own testimony, taken from his book, where he tells us how he learned to live in the presence of God. He tells us that God transformed him when he was 18, and that when he saw a tree without leaves in winter, he realized that it would soon blossom again. This vision made him understand the power of God and filled him with love for him. He decided to dedicate his life to God, renouncing the pleasures of the world. However, he didn't feel that he was depriving himself of something, but that he was experiencing great satisfaction in giving his life to God. Brother Lawrence discovered that it is possible to be in communion with God all the time, talking to him continually, and that it is a shame to stop talking to him to think about unimportant things. He believed that we should nourish our souls with great thoughts about God, which will bring us great joy. He decided that God's love would be the motivation for all his actions. He says that for a while he was troubled by the idea that he could be condemned, but he realized that this doubt came from a lack of faith. From that moment on, he lived in perfect freedom and joy, offering his sins to God and trusting in his grace. He believed that God would always help him, giving him the strength to do whatever he needed. If he failed, he simply admitted his mistake to God and didn't worry about it anymore. Even when he had to do tasks he didn't like buying wine, he trusted in God, and everything worked out in the end. He got used to doing everything out of love for God. Even working in the monastery kitchen, a place he didn't like very much, he found peace and joy because he had got used to doing everything out of love for God. The moments he dedicated to prayer were no different from other times of the day because he lived in constant communion with God. He said that even in the midst of the noise and bustle of the kitchen, he felt God's presence, as if he were kneeling at the Blessed Sacrament. Brother Lawrence summed up his practice as follows: how can we pray to God without being with him? And how can we be with him without thinking about him often? And how can we think of him often without forming the holy habit of being in his presence? For him, the foundation of the spiritual life was having a high image and esteem of God. He learned to reject all other thoughts in order to do everything for the love of God. If he forgot God for a while, he would return to him with more confidence because he felt sad for having forgotten him. Trust in God is something that pleases him greatly and attracts his grace. Brother Lawrence experienced God's help on every occasion. He didn't worry about the tasks he had to do because he knew that God would show him what was needed. When the tasks took him away from God, he felt a new remembrance that ignited him and carried him away. He said that if we knew how much we needed God's presence, we wouldn't lose sight of him for a moment. He also teaches us that many methods of prayer can confuse us rather than help us, and that the most important thing is to give ourselves totally to God. We must renounce everything that is not of him and live as if there were nothing but God. Brother Lawrence placed himself before God, seeing him as a father and as his God. He kept his mind on his holy presence, remembering it whenever he found himself far away. He believed that the best way to go to God was to do the most ordinary things without the aim of pleasing people, but out of love for God. For him, there should be no difference between prayer time and other times. We should cling to God both in the time of action and in the time of prayer. His prayers were just a feeling of God's presence, and he remained in communion with him all the time, praising and blessing him. Brother Lawrence also teaches us about how to deal with wandering thoughts, which are like a monkey in our minds. He reminds us that our will is the master of our other abilities, and it has power over our thoughts. We can bring our mind back to God. When our mind wanders away from God, we must calmly and confidently bring it back into his presence. He advises us to trust in God and put aside other concerns, and even some forms of devotion, so that we can be in his presence. We can stay in communion with God through praise, worship, longing, waiting, or gratitude. We shouldn't be discouraged if it's difficult at first, because our nature can rebel against stillness before God. We must make an effort to remain in his presence and not give in to thoughts that tell us it's a waste of time. In a letter to a friend who was suffering, Brother Lawrence says that suffering can be proof of God's love for us. He encourages us to offer our sorrows to the Lord, asking for the strength to bear them. And above all, he advises us to rejoice in God. He says that even when God seems to hide from us, we should exercise our faith in him. He himself considered himself happy, even though he deserved discipline, because he felt God's presence continually. He was only afraid of leaving God. He calls us to live and die in his presence. In one of his last letters, he says that he didn't mind being on the brink of death, and that he asked God for the strength to suffer with courage, humility, and love. He says that it is possible to live in paradise, suffering with God, and that it is possible to live in the Lord's presence in any circumstances. The secret is to get used to an intimate and loving conversation with Jesus, preventing our spirit from drifting away from him, no matter what the circumstances. Brother Lawrence's words show us that we don't need special times to pray or be with God. God's presence can accompany us at all times, in all the activities of our day. We can rejoice in God, communicate with him, and experience his peace and love no matter what we are doing. So what? Answering the question we asked at the beginning, yes, it is possible to feel God's presence in all our daily activities. Brother Lawrence is a living example of how we can live in constant communion with God. If you also want to live this way, be inspired by Brother Lawrence's story. Start practicing the presence of God today, communicating with him at all times, and you will see that your life will be transformed. I hope this story has been inspiring for you. May you too experience God's presence in all your days. May God bless you. If you like this content, leave a comment, share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.